Hello and welcome to Nashville, Tennessee, USA. This is Brian Merchant, and this is another video on the series of working on NSM 45 mechanisms, ES4 series. A question was asked on another video that I had about a mechanism that doesn't want to carry on down the track. In other words, it's stuck on one record and it doesn't want to move on down the line. And that is typical of of the trip arm not resetting back to the scan position on the post, and there's several things that can cause that. I'm going to explain those, but just to get things started, I've rigged up a mechanism here with a power supply, and you can do this, but there's another method. But this is a DC mechanism. You cannot do this with an AC mechanism, and the difference is this one has the plastic cover. That's a DC motor driving the mechanism. This is an AC motor on the play. They always have AC on the play, but some of them have AC motors on the scan motor. Some of them have DC. So I can get away with this on this DC motor. It would be a little trickier with an AC motor. You'd have to supply the correct AC voltage and have a run capacitor and so on. So we're not going to do that. But you can also, if you don't hook up a motor to drive this, there's several other ways. If you're in your jukebox, all of the NSM jukeboxes will have one of these test posts inside the jukebox somewhere. And this is just a rod with a couple of holes in either end. And the idea with this is, if you're servicing the mechanism, you can remove the mechanism from the jukebox by lifting up on these handles. You have to rotate this locking arm to the flat position here, and then you can release this all the way. Now, when you're running the jukebox, this needs to be in the straight down position. But you turn it around till the flat's lined up, and then you can pull these arms up and release the mechanism from the jukebox. After you do that, if you look at the bottom of the mechanism, you'll see there's a large post right here, and that is designed to fit right on that pole like so. And then somewhere in the bottom of the jukebox there'll be a hole that you can slide that into, and it'll hold that mechanism just like that, where you can work on it outside of the magazine. And that's very useful for this type of thing, because you can get it up here and you can run it without any hassle and get in there and mess with the mechanism. So keep that in mind. That's the way you would normally do that in the machine, using your test post. Okay, but I'm not going to do that here. I've rigged this up to run off of a DC power supply. I'm giving it 10 volts, just enough to run the motor. And I'm grabbing that right off of these two wires right here. You got the last two wires on this connector here, and if you follow the wire, you'll see that it goes around to that DC motor. And it doesn't matter the polarity, because you're going to reverse the motor by switching the polarity. But don't give it, only do this if you know what you're doing, because you don't want to over voltage these motors. Okay, so I've got this rigged up. If I hit this button, I'm going to give it 10 volts. And you can see that the DC motor runs. Now, to trip this, and if you had it on your post, you could do the same thing. To trip this, right in here is the trip solenoid. It's right on the back side of this bar, and it's got an end sticking out over here. So to trip this thing manually, you just want to stick your finger in the end of that. I just put my finger in there, and with my fingernail just push the end of that solenoid, and when you do, it will trip that. You can see it's going up into play position. Now it's just going to cycle through, because I'm just putting voltage on it, so it's not going to stop in the play position like it normally would. But I want you to see here, when I trip this, what's going on. There's the trip arm. If you look right here, I don't know if you can see this. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit. All right, if you can look in there, you will see the end of the trip arm. It's a little steel bar inside this little square notch right here. You look in there and you'll see a little steel post on the end of that thing, and then the bar sitting on it. And that thing should be sitting halfway between the center of that post and the outside edge. And I can see that this is backwards for me. However, now when that solenoid comes out, all it does is it pushes this. Whoops, sorry. When you push that trip arm, what happens is it pushes that bar off of that post, and I can do it right here too. Just give it a little push, and it falls right off, and it goes into the scanning position. Now, I'm going to stop this thing, and this is what you would want to do. Maybe rig yourself up. Let me get this pack out here a little bit. Maybe rig yourself up a switch on your power cord where you can stop it once it gets up into play. But what you want to do is trip it, and you want to stop it. You want to watch that bar when you trip it, and when it comes up almost into play position, that trip arm bar should be slightly above that post. And it goes through that cycle. There's cams in there that operate that. So as it's cycling through to get into play, it comes up and that cam will raise that bar above that post. And the spring tension of the bar will push it back over. And then as it finishes going into play, it'll sit back down on the post. And that puts it back in the trip into the scan position and gets it ready for the next trip. Now, if it does not raise that bar up above the post, then that's not good, because that means that either and I'll show you when I get this torn apart, there's a couple of cams that relate to this, the main camshaft being one. You could have a groove worn on the main camshaft, or the cam follower, which is what that trip arm is part of, has a cam that rides on the main camshaft, and a lot of times those will get worn down from just rubbing on the camshaft over the years. And then when it gets to that part, it cannot raise it up high enough to get it up above the post, and consequently it won't reset. So it'll just keep on playing the same song over and over and over. It'll come up, bring the record up, it'll come down, put the record back, and then it'll turn around and pick it right back up because it did not reset. So if you're lucky, you just need to adjust it a little bit. If you're not, then you've got some worn out cams, and those would have to be replaced. I have thought a time or two, if you could not get the cam as a last ditch resort, you might be able to build up the end of the cam follower with something, maybe a little piece of steel, and glue it on there or something. But I digress on that. Okay, so let's get into this. So if we need to adjust this, if you're looking into this cam, and that steel arm on the end of that camshaft is not getting up on that post, or if I'm sorry, if it is getting on the post, then you need to adjust it, because if it's getting up above the post but it's not getting reset to right of center, and it's coming back down and slipping back off the post, that's when it would need adjusting. And the way you adjust that is simply to loosen these two large screws right here. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to loosen, and I'm going to take this apart and show you what all is in here. If you remove these two screws, we can drop this down, and you can see here's the trip solenoid. I don't know if you can see that, hopefully. And there's the part that I'm pushing on to trip it. And you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but there's the steel post and here's the trip lever. By the way, you can reset that manually just by pushing up on that. It's spring loaded. And if you look in there, you can see how it follows the main camshaft. The end of that arm has a cam on it that follows the main camshaft lobe, and that's what raises that up. So if that main shaft is worn too deep, or the end of that little white cam is worn, that's what causes the real problems. But we're just concerned at the moment with adjusting it. So what we want to do is adjust it such that that steel arm rests halfway between the center of this little steel post and the right side edge of it. So if you needed to adjust it, what you would want to do, rather than taking this completely off, is just loosen those screws and maybe move it slightly to the right so that it wouldn't slip off of those posts. So I'm going to put these back together. And if I was doing this from scratch, what I'd want to do is get this where it's up against that, where that trip arm shaft of that solenoid is right up against that steel bar, and then push it over just a little bit and lock them down. Make sure your springs are back on for your release levers. Alright, and then you want to cycle it and watch it and make sure that it's reset into the proper position, which it is. And then we could test it again by tripping it manually, like so, and making sure that it does get reset. Now if it's not getting on the post, I'll show you, I'll simulate. It'll be basically like this. It'll take it down, pick it up. It doesn't get back on the post, so it just continues to cycle around again. And it'll do that all day. Now it'll stop and play the record on your jukebox, but every time the record's over, it'll just keep on cycling back around. So that's the basics of adjusting the trip. And I hope that was helpful to you guys. By the way, I do repair jukeboxes. I repair a lot of other electronics. Just about anything that's broke. Monitors, power supplies, amplifiers, guitar amplifiers. This is Nashville Music City, by the way. And that brings me around to, I'm also a part of a bluegrass band, so if you get a chance, check us out on the internet. Just look up Fade to Blue Bluegrass and you'll find us, probably on Facebook. There's videos to watch there. Hope you like it. And I'll see you next time.